I'm really excited for this next session. Fagan Harris is the Chief Executive Officer and President of Baltimore Core. Think of an organization that takes really smart people who want to solve a problem and puts them in a place working with a nonprofit or even entrepreneurs to directly attack the problems of that place and make a transformative difference in the lives of the people of that place. That's what he's doing today in Baltimore. He's going to talk about that. Earlier in his career, he spent time at the Aspen Institute. Yes, the Ideas Festival folks. Join me in welcoming Fagan Harris.
Thanks, Tom.
Welcome, Dale.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, MCON. I am so happy to be here today. The values of this convening and this gathering is ones that really resonate with our work at Baltimore Core, the emphasis on changing passion and interest for a cause into action for a cause is what we work on every day in Baltimore City. I love its belief in youth. To paraphrase Bobby Kennedy, not just as a time of life, but a state of mind. So thank you so much, MCON, for having us. We're going to talk about Baltimore today, my home. I grew up in Baltimore. I went to public school in Baltimore. I spent pretty much the entirety of my early life before college in Baltimore City, before going off for college and work. And several years ago, I returned home and rediscovered this incredible community of change makers and cause leaders, social entrepreneurs, people who are rewriting the script in our cities, moving the needle for families and communities. And I would sit down with them, people like Chris Wilson and Sarah Heminger, who I'm going to speak a little bit about later today, and say, you guys have really cracked it. You're getting results. What's it going to take to double down and take these results to scale? Like, what's the holdup? Is it money? No, it's not money. Does the model need tweaking? Are you not getting the kind of results that we think you're getting? No, the results are great. The results are there. What's the problem? It's people. It's the bench. Baltimore's gotten smaller every year for more than 60 years. And that's not just bad for the tax base. That's not just bad for our neighborhoods and communities. It inhibits our ability to execute and to get big things done. And even if we have change makers who have their finger on the pulse, it's really hard to take those solutions to scale. So that's the problem that we try to solve at Baltimore Core. Effectively, we are a platform that connects talent to visionary cause leadership and ultimately the most impactful and important opportunities to make the world a better place. The question we're obsessed with is, why can't Baltimore be to social change what New York is to finance, or San Francisco is to technology? Why can't we be that destination? Why can't we be the best place in the world to change the world? So this is what we obsess about, and this is what we try to tackle and challenge and do our best that we can to make our city stronger every day. So when I got invited to speak, I was really excited to dig into our model, to talk about scaling social innovation, to talk about leveraging our cause infrastructure in Baltimore to attract and retain a new generation of leaders, to use that as an anchor for revitalizing and renewing a resurging city. I was excited to dig into all of those things. But as the Baltimore guy on the program, in light of recent events, there's an elephant in the room. So it's no secret that the last several months have been a difficult one for our city. It's been hard. The untimely, unjust, and tragic death of Freddie Gray has not just elevated the tensions in our community, it has reminded our city and revealed to the nation that we've got urgent and persistent challenges, that there are conditions that span generations that have relegated far too many for far too long to the margins of our society. And for many Americans, that's where the story begins and ends. When they think about Baltimore, they think of pictures like this. They think about the hard truths and the hard facts. And that's all they get, and that's all they think about, and that's all they see. But for Baltimoreans, that's just a portion of the portrait. That's just a small part of the story. The truth is, we've got incredibly courageous and resilient and gritty and tenacious people, everyday citizens, anonymous innovators, game changers for social action, who are changing the narrative for families, for communities, for neighborhoods, for an entire city. So today I want to profile three of those people, three of those leaders who we work with at Baltimore Core. These are our visionary cause leaders. They're the center of our model. We go out and find the smartest people in the country to work with people who we think are the best in the world at changing the world. So I want to begin with Dr. Lena Nguyen. She's the new health commissioner at Baltimore City. We've got nearly 10 fellows in the health department who are working with her to respond to the recent unrest. She is changing and elevating a new policy narrative about public health in our communities. What she is eloquently spoken about and is powerfully leading about is that even though lead poisoning, malnourishment, trauma did not kill Freddie Gray in April, it certainly didn't help his chances at having a safe and prosperous life. And too many people are still being impacted by those forces, and we know what to do. And that's what our fellows are there to help her with, is to connect those solutions, to work with that community of practice, to be in West Baltimore on the ground, making lives better for people who are still enduring and engaging with a lot of this really hard stuff. So we're very proud to work with Dr. Nguyen and the extraordinary team of fellows over there. Now I want to tell you about Chris Wilson. Chris is one of my favorite people. So Chris, 3 months ago, got released from federal prison where he spent 14 years incarcerated. 14 years. And he got dropped off in downtown Baltimore without a dollar in his pocket, with no support, no prospects. He was homeless, no family. But Chris is special. Chris walked from the bus stop in downtown Baltimore all the way to University of Baltimore, and by the end of the day, he got himself an apartment at the University of Baltimore. By the end of the week, he had a full ride, and he had restarted his studies and began studying entrepreneurship and business. At the end of 6 months, he had started his first company, reupholstering furniture. By the end of the year, he had a holding company called Barclay Investments Corporation that staffs construction jobs around the city, that recruits returning citizens and gives them that first step back into the labor market. Chris, in so many ways, exemplifies the spirit of Baltimore. Here's a man from a population that's often maligned and stigmatized, written off, viewed too often as a deficit and not an asset, and he has built a company that has hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue every year that creates dozens of jobs for a population that many people write off as hopeless and helpless and not of value. And so we've got a team of fellows working with Chris to help professionalize and grow and scale that business. In a city that is the most heavily incarcerated in the nation, and the nation that is the most heavily incarcerated in the world, Chris is pointing the way forward. It's yet another example of where Baltimoreans are innovating and driving progress and solving some of the most urgent and important problems. I want to talk to you about Thread, another one of my favorite people, Sarah Heminger. Sarah runs an organization called Thread. Get this now, check this out. Think about this. They work with the bottom 5% in Baltimore City schools. These are young people, I've heard different figures, but conservatively with an average GPA of less than 1.0. I've heard as low as 0.2. Once she brings them into the program, she says it's the best kind of gang. Once you get in, you can't get out. They make a 10-year commitment to these young people. They mobilize a community of volunteers, getting 10 bodies per young person, and they stick with them until they graduate high school. Fast forward, 12 years they've been doing this. 12 years. 100% of their children have graduated high school, 90% have gone on to college, 82% have graduated from college. These just aren't city-leading results, these are nation-leading results. And she's doing it while redefining our notion of family, by challenging those volunteers to think more critically about their engagement with their neighbors, those kids who are too often viewed as hopeless and helpless and a product of a system that's too broken, too beyond repair. Here's an example where things are getting better. Our team of fellows are working with Sarah to scale that model, and we're on an ambitious timeline over the next 10 years to see that reach more kids in Baltimore City. If you think Baltimore's problems, when you hear these stories, you're like, that's great, but these problems are unique to Baltimore, that we've got these issues because we just don't get it, or we're somehow behind with the times, you haven't been paying attention. All across this country, there are cities that are dealing with the same challenges that we have in Baltimore. Rampant disinvestment, intergenerational poverty, and the consequences of that. And those consequences have bubbled to the forefront today. If you believe that cities across this country are failing to tackle that, then you should draw hope and inspiration from Baltimore, because we're truly on the front lines, and we're truly leading the way. And it's our people, it's the people like Sarah and Chris who are pushing us forward. It's the people like Jane and Jasmine. I want to share this story. It's one that is very close to me. So years ago, I had this teacher who saw things in me before I saw it in myself, and we were very close. And she still teaches in the school system to this day, and she told me this story, and I thought it was very poignant. She was teaching a group of high school seniors in Baltimore City schools, and it's getting towards the end of the year, kids are antsy to get out. And two young women, we'll call them Jane and Jasmine, are sitting there chatting, right, talking during class. She goes, Jane, Jasmine, stop talking during class. You all need to support one another. Help each other achieve your future and your goals. And they looked at her. If you all ever worked with teenagers or had teenagers, or if you've been a teenager, which is all of you, that blue steel, cold steel look. So she backed off and said, fine. And the class dismissed, and everyone went home. And after work, she was talking to a colleague. She said, would you believe Jane and Jasmine talking during the lesson today? I told them they needed to support one another. The colleague said, well, they do. They do support one another. In fact, they share a shift at Wendy's. And while one of them is working the shift at Wendy's, another one is waiting in line at the local homeless shelter where they share a bed. And they alternate. And they're both admitted to college, and they're both going on. And even though everyone else has let them down, they haven't let down one another. We are a gritty, resilient, tough people. And our challenge, and my challenge to you, is to get beyond the headlines, get on the ground, get in the neighborhoods, and to see those people, and to see the incredible work that's happening, not just by incredible social entrepreneurs and leaders, but by citizens, children, youth, people like Jane and Jasmine. They're the lifeblood of our city. We rely on them. They chart the course forward. So my challenge to all the young people, because I'm in the recruiting young people to do good things business, is you need to do hard things. We need more people doing hard things. Several generations ago, we had a leader in public life who reminded us that we do hard things precisely because they are hard, not because they're easy. Because taking on a hard challenge organizes us and brings out the best. We measure ourselves against it. And we can't wait, because the hardest things are what is worth fighting for. Because the moments that define us aren't the easy ones, we take our game to the next level when we do hard things. It's not in dispute that the last few months have been so hard for Baltimore. No one's washing over that. No one's trying to blow past that. But we got to reject the impulse to walk away from trauma. We have to lean into it. Because it's in leaning into hard things that we do big things. So I hope you'll join us. I hope you'll rebuild with us. Thank you so much for your time today.
Please. Fantastic stories, wonderful people. I know Baltimore pretty well. The problems there are deeply rooted. They are systemic. Some would say they are intractable. You almost would have to be Superman to take on those problems. But you're finding normal people.
Yep.
What's the background? Your fellows who you're placing into these organizations. Who are they? What do they look like?
Well, at Baltimore Core, I don't think we're trying to persuade 100% of the population. We're not trying to get the world to move to Baltimore Core. We're looking for pioneers. We want people who see those challenges and are inspired by it. And by the way, pioneers are different than homesteaders, right? This is different than the people who move into the city and they're like, great, where are my new digs? This is awesome. These are people who come out when the chips are down, and it is hard. And it is hard. There's no getting past that. But I think what's inspiring is there are really extraordinary, ordinary people on the ground who understand the solutions of what we need to do. And after a generation of innovating and gaining insight into the solutions, we now need to build. And we need pioneers to build with us.
Can one person really make a difference?
Absolutely. I mean, every single one of those stories, especially if you look at Chris and Sarah, that's the story of a single person who decided to take on a big problem in their community. And you fast forward a number of years, and the network effects are extraordinary. Sarah's got more than 1,000 volunteers working with hundreds of kids, the hardest kids in Baltimore City, and has had 100% success. That's extraordinary. And she'll tell you it's not just because of her genius and her vision and her talent. A lot of it is the contribution of that individual who puts into 2 or 3 hours a week to volunteer, who goes and gets McDonald's and picks these kids up and takes them to school. It's a bunch of discrete acts that add up something really huge over time.
So where do the fellows plug in to really accelerate this progress? What are they able to bring to the table that helps Sarah scale her program?
Well, they're system builders. You know, you look at Chris Wilson, who's working with returning citizens. Chris's genius is he knows how to work with this really challenging population, and he converts them into the assets that they are. Well, Chris doesn't necessarily know how to build a website or do business development or to build a board or to get grants to accelerate the progress of a model that we know works. There's a lot of common, difficult professional practice that if you bring it into these organizations, these entrepreneurs, you can see big things.
So here's a question I want to take straight from the audience.
Yeah.
How can local businesses, nonprofits, government agencies, community leaders, all of whom have their own point of view and their own focus, how do you get them to work together, to collaborate, to attack these problems? What's working in Baltimore? Where would you like to see things work better in Baltimore?
It's a great question. I think we've got to put people back into focus here, right? So I don't want anyone to take away from this that, oh, we need to recruit a bunch of people outside of Baltimore to Baltimore and that'll fix it. Quite the contrary. I think we've got extraordinary people doing extraordinary work and it's working and things are getting better. And we need people from the outside to come in and play support and to invest in that and double down on that. And it's all the more important because if you look around right now, and other people have commented on this, Baltimore's never going to attract another Fortune 500 company to Baltimore City. The next Fortune 500 company in Baltimore is going to be grown in Baltimore. It's going to be built in Baltimore, like Under Armour. And again, that's one person with a dream and an affinity and a passion for a place, and then it's a community of people who mobilize and invest in that person's vision, and then they build.
Now, the Baltimore I know absolutely includes West Baltimore. It absolutely includes the poverty and this persistent underclass problem. But the Baltimore I know also includes places like the Broom Factory and the Can Works and this incredible community of technologists, entrepreneurs, engineers that, what are they doing in Baltimore? Yeah. Talk a little bit about those assets that I know exist in that community.
Oh, man, they're just tremendous. I mean, you take University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC. Huge fan of President Hrabowski and his vision there. That's an example of an anchor institution that's decided to step up to the plate. They said, you know what? There's more than enough bright young people who are converting into huge engineering talents. Let's make the case to them that Baltimore is the best place to build those companies. And they've been at it for 20 years, and the results speak for themselves. It's the best kept secret in America as far as I'm concerned.
I think U.S. News has called it, one of the best rising institutions, colleges in America, 3 or 4 years running. The Broom Factory is the place that I know of because a friend of mine has done a startup there. You know, literally what its name implies. It's an old broom factory that's been converted into this collaborative workspace. You know, do the civic leaders understand that that's where the future is? You know, that there is this community that will grow itself out of some of these problems and build great jobs for great people?
It's a great question. We've got pockets of brilliance in our civic leadership infrastructure, and we try to double down on those at every turn. And I hope that as we get more proof points and more success, we'll see more of that happen. Now,
what are some of the examples? Name a couple fellows. You've got what? Your first class of 10 fellows is finishing up now. You want to scale that? I think you were talking earlier about taking that to as many as 40 in the next year. What are some of the examples that have convinced you this will work because of what this person did at that place?
Yeah. I mean, again, Thread, with the work with Sarah Heminger, Chris Wilson, the work he's doing at Barclay Investment Corporation. There's going to be a litany of community-based entrepreneurs, folks who for a long time have labored in obscurity, frankly, because we have another issue in this country where too many people do not have a seat at the table, do not have adequate access to not just financial capital, but human capital. We know this is an urgent and persistent challenge. I'm not convinced that people don't have a heart or a passion for these individuals and these models, but they need to be asked. There needs to be a clear front door. People need to know where to go. And so that's what we're working on to fix that.
So, and this is another one straight from the audience, and it's a brilliant question, whoever came up with it. Your fellows, you know, the organizations are going to benefit from the time and effort of your fellows. What's the win for your fellows? What do they look like? What's their path look like 5 or 10 years out?
That's a great question. Well, we see them as the bench. I hope that they become the next Sarah Hemingers and the next Chris Wilsons, that they get to learn under a world-class social change leader. I hope some of them go and run for mayor and become the mayor of the city and the health commissioner. I hope all of them become homeowners. I hope they get married. I hope they have lots of kids.
Send them to the public schools in the city?
Absolutely. I'm super excited for my first Baltimore Core wedding, so the right person might be in this audience. Join our third class.
They might. So as much as I know Baltimore, I'm not from Baltimore, I don't live in Baltimore, but I look at this model and I think about where I live and it's like, there's something there. Do you think this idea of this service corps model, is that transferable to other places? And if so, what have you learned in this first year that somebody out there is thinking the same thing, they need to keep in mind?
It's a great question. So the first part of that is the millennial generation's up for grabs. I think a lot of young people look at New York and they look at San Francisco and they look at DC and the rents are very high, the labor markets are extremely competitive. A lot, not all, are saying, you know what, maybe I do want to live in an Austin or a Cleveland or a Baltimore. Maybe I need to take a second look. So I think the first thing is this generation's up for grabs. And for a subset of cities, especially those in the American Rust Belt, that have really struggled with population decline over the last 40 years, this is a huge opportunity. I think the service corps model is the model to turn the corner on it because you're not trying to boil the ocean. You're not trying to convince everyone to move into these places instantly. You're getting the pioneers. You're getting the people who like to build things, who want to be on the front lines, who want to heed that call to service, I think is so exemplary of millennials in this country.
But is one person enough?
One person enough?
These fellows are going through transformative experiences. The organizations they're working with are hopefully being transformed and made for the better, but is that enough? Can that solve the problems?
Well, I think, so let's dig into that, right? Because implied in that question is somehow, somewhere out there, there's a silver bullet. Newsflash, there is no silver bullet. There's no one thing that we can do that's going to fix all of this, that's going to fix all the systemic challenges at scale, wrap the whole thing up, be done. That's not going to happen. What we need now more than ever is not just goodwill and good works, but commitment. And we need enduring commitment. And we need people to move into these cities and build not just great companies and great models for social change, but lives there. And that's going to take a long time. It's taken generations to get into this mess. It's going to take us generations to get out of this mess. But I believe young people are up to the challenge. So is one person enough? Not yet, but where else do you start? And one person becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 8. And over time, you look up and you've got a movement. But you got to start with that first step.
Absolutely brilliant. Last thing from the audience, less of a question, but the most popular upvote in the social stream for this session is, we want you to know that we stand with Baltimore. Thank you for doing the hard work where it's needed.
Thank you so
Fagan,
much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Outstanding work.